Hi there and welcome back to Northlight Photographic Workshops. And welcome to part 2 in this series that I've been doing, taking a image from an original negative, a 120 negative in this case, all the way through making a digital negative, and then finally making a final platinum print with that image. Now, just to make it a little bit more fun, I've been working with this image of Patti Smith that I shot back 30 years ago. This was 1995, and we had mutual connections in Detroit, and I got hired to do some work for her, and I've got quite a history. She was my first Rolling Stone assignment, and anyway, all that aside, it makes a fun portrait to work with here, and what we're going to do now in this episode of the series is make the digital negative. Now, you can see the original, or part 1 up here, where we digitized the negative by actually taking a photograph of this negative on a light table and making a high resolution negative that I was able to then make a positive of and work up through Photoshop, as you can see over here on the computer right now. Now, this is the final image that I came up with after working through the negative, and I actually added a little bit of color to it because I wanted to kind of simulate what it was going to look like in the Palladium process, just for my own benefit. But I'll have to take this back to grayscale before I make it into a digital negative. Now, the process that I'm going to do this is I'm going to actually invert the image that you see here on the screen. But in doing so, you can't just simply invert the image and then expect to make a negative and have a beautiful print or a fine print or a finished print from that, because the output of your printer doesn't always match the input, is what I'm saying. The Palladium process, or whatever process you're working with, has a different exposure scale. And you have to basically bend a curve to match that exposure scale. And you do that by going through a curve building process and you know, basically balancing out a step wedge like this until you're placing all of your levels of gray where they're supposed to be. And that way you know what you've worked up on your screen is going to come through in your final image. Now, again, there's a much more detailed process in making the digital negative, and if you'll go up here, there'll be another link to the process of making the digital negative. I've got a complete playlist out there. There's several video parts, so if you really want to delve into it deeply, I suggest you go look at these. But for now, we're going to be printing this out on what is called an OHP, overhead projector film. This here that we're using is made by Pictorico, and this is just a half sheet that I'm going to use, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be proofing this negative as we go along in this video here, which means that what I'm going to do is I've got a curve built already that I'm going to apply to this negative, but not always does it give me exactly what I want that I see on the screen. So very often what I have to do is to make a print, make a negative, then make a print, and then judge from that print the changes that I need to make in the computer to make my final print look the way that I want it to look. So what we're going to do here first is just go through and print this one out. So the process that I go through, put on my glasses here, the process that I go through is to, I'll take this image and I'll invert it, adjustments, invert, and so there I've got my negative. But again, it has to be printed through a certain curve to be able to make it look like this when it prints out on the final print. Now what I also have to do, because I print emulsion to emulsion on my negative, I have to rotate this image horizontal. So I'm going to do that right now. And now the final thing that I'm going to do is size this image. Now, I've made the adjustments, I've saved this image in its current state, so I'm not going to worry about doing anything there other than right now resizing it to the proof size that I want it to make, which is going to be fitting on a half sheet. It's 5.5 by 8.5, 5.5 by 8.5, so I'm going to make this 4 1/4 square. So I'm going to adjust my image size here. I'm going to go down here first to the resolution. It comes out in a native resolution at 240. I'm going to change that to 300 because that's where I want to be. Now what I'm going to do up here is change my image size to 4.25. Now that's going to give me a 4¼ inch square image, and I'm going to go here and say File, save a copy. I'm going to save that copy in my Patti Smith folder here as Patti Smith 1995 _ neg 1. So that's for -1. So let's save that in there. And now I'm going to go over here and open up another tool that I use, which is called Print Tool. Now this is something else you'll see in that series on the digital negative if you're interested in using it. So what I'm going to do here is lay out the image that I want to print. And I'm going to take that negative, -1 Patti Smith. Here we go. We've got this right here. Now I place it on here. I'm going to put the substrate into the printer, and we're going to print this negative out. Now once I've got this negative printed out, I'm going to dry it out, and we're going to take it into the darkroom and print it. So anyway, let me show you the process that I go through here, even though there's a much more in-depth version of this. I go here to the paper and print settings. I go to half letter. I'm setting there. I go here and I choose my quad P800 printer because I'm using the QTR process, which is the quad tone rip process, which is a different rip than just your normal Epson printer. And by the way, this is a process that needs to be done with the Epson printers. Again, you can see this all in the playlist. I don't want to get too in-depth in it here. So anyway, I'm going to choose, in my layout, I'm going to go down here to quad tone rip, and I'm going to choose correction. This is my correct curve that I've built for this. And I'm going to say save, and we're going to run this print. So I've got to get the substrate in the printer. We're going to run it out, and then next you'll see me in the darkroom where we're going to dry this and make the first proof print of it. So stick with me. Now that we've got the negative printed out, our first proof negative, it's time to make to coat the paper and to make the first print. Now, as I mentioned before, this is just a facsimile negative. What I mean by saying a facsimile negative is it's just a smaller version of the one that I'm going to finally print out. So what I do when I'm working on this, as I explained it before, is I work on it in its full size, then I size it down to make the proof negative, make the proof negative. If I like it, then I size it back up, and I print it out that way. But if not, I go back to the original size negative and I make my adjustments. Then I make a smaller proof negative at that time. And when I say a facsimile negative, it's exactly the same as the big print, only it's a small print. Whereas if I was doing a matrix proof, that would be basically taking a small version of the print or a small section of the print at its full size. I do that sometimes on large digital prints, but very rarely on these kind of prints. So anyway, it's a facsimile negative as opposed to a matrix negative. So what I'm going to do is bring this over here onto my piece of paper. I've got the same kind of paper that I'm going to be using to make my full-size print, which is Hahnemühle Platinum Rag, is the paper that I use most often. And thanks again to Hahnemühle for sponsoring me as well. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is take this negative and lay it over here on the top of the piece of paper. Let's see, I take a pencil, and then I will just hold my pencil at the corner, drop a dot, put it back there, drop a dot, put it back there, drop another dot, and the same way here. So that way, basically I know where my corners are. So when I go back to coat my paper, I can just coat that area. Once again, I'm not going to be masking this off. I'm not going to mask off the paper to make my coating. I'll do that in the very final one, and that's going to be the final, or the next episode of this series here. So anyway, for now, I'm just going to leave it this way, and we're going to have rough edges. So bring it over here. I'm going to take out 5 drops of my Palladium, 5 drops of my ferric oxalate. And then, as always, I add a couple drops of tween, especially when I'm working with the Hahnemühle, the Platinum Rag, because it tends to be very, it's a little bit finicky. It likes a little bit of tween to help it flow the emulsion into the surface. So there we go. Let me get a little bit of water on my brush. Excuse me here. I usually just take a very little bit of water, I rinse it out, and then I just dab it onto a piece of paper towel very lightly. And then I'll come over here and you can see how I coat the paper. And I'll just kind of outline to where my corners are or my black dots are. And then I'll kind of coat it the other way. And that way again. By now I'm getting a pretty nice coating, and I'm just gonna, like you can see, just drag it off lightly like that with the weight of the brush. So while I'm rinsing the brush out, this gets a little bit of a chance to settle in. So bear with me while I rinse this out. Okay, and then I dab out my brush once again, and I will dry out and put a piece of paper towel inside of my shot glass and put it off to the side. I never put anything with water after I've coated the paper over the top of the paper again, because I don't want any drops to fall in there, because that can pretty much destroy your coating. So now that I have that coated that way, I'm going to take a dryer, and on cool I'm going to dry it out a little bit more. And as you can see, as it dries, it starts to darken. Now I like to dry it till it feels dry on the surface and it won't stick to my negative, but I don't like to dry it crispy dry or anything like that. And this feels pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is bring over my contact printing frame and get that ready, open it up, take out an old negative. And then I'm going to take the negative here that I've just created, and I'm going to match it up with that piece of paper like that, so that I make sure that my negative is covering the emulsion. And then I put it here face down into the print frame and lock it in. And as you can see, it's ready to print. So then I'm going to take it over here to the contact printer, and I set it at 9 minutes. Now, 9 minutes is my predetermined black level. So I know that I'm going to get a jet black at that, or I'm going to get my maximum black, I should say, at that 9 minutes. So let that expose, and then we'll go on to the development of that. So this is always a pretty exciting time for me. Got the exposure made. It's the very first unveiling of this. So we've got it done here. You can see a bit of an image on here right now, and that's going to change to a nice sparking image, I hope, but very rarely do I get it in the first shot. What I'm doing by building the curve is I make it so that I get a reasonable image of what I see on the screen on my print. It's very rarely exactly that, and what I have to do is what we're doing right now is to go back and proof them. So anyway, let's put this down here in the developer. Now, if you want to know more about the Platinum process, follow my link up here to my whole playlist on the Platinum printing process. And there's also going to be another link up there for the whole digital negative process that I do. I mean, I'm just kind of cursory going through this with you right now to show you my process and taking it from an original negative all the way through to a final Palladium print. So here we go. Going to pour on the potassium oxalate real fast. Oh, and there it is. Now, it's looking pretty good, but I am never so sure in the initial print while it's still in the developer like this, because very often when they dry, they'll dry to the middle, meaning that the darks will get a little bit lighter and the lights will get a little bit darker. So although everything always looks good in the developer and while it's wet, it very rarely does look that perfect when it dries out. So what I'm going to do is run this through all of the clearing baths and wash it and then dry it, and then we're going to make a determination and then go back out to the computer and make an adjustment to the original image, and then we will reprint out the negative, the facsimile negative, a smaller negative, and see what it looks like, see what that finished one looks like. So bear with me while we get on to the next step. Okay, so I've gone through and dried the print, washed it and dried it as I would any other print, and I've come to the determination that it's just a little bit flat. I'm not sure how it will render on the video here. Let me look at my monitor. Yeah, you can see how it's just a little bit flat. Not quite like here on the monitor. I want it to be a little more crispy. Now, naturally, it's not going to be like this because this is radiative light and this is reflective light. But I still want to pump it up a little bit more. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a correction layer here. So let's go in and let's see. We're going to add one for levels. And as you can see, it looks pretty good from end to end, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to spark up the highlights just a little bit, like that. Because what I want to do is I want to be able to lighten her sweater a little bit to get a little bit more spark to it. And I also want to darken her hair also a little bit as well. So, like I say, I've sparked up the highlights a little bit like this, and now I'm going to come over here to the low end and I'm going to just kind of compress the low end a little bit and darken her hair, just a hair like that, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is close that window and I will turn on and off the adjustment layer so you can see what I mean. So you can see that's a little flatter, it's got a little more spark to it. All right? Much like I want the change in this. So what I'm going to do there is flatten this now. I'm going to flatten that layer, flatten the image, and now I'm going to save it as a new, well, what I'm going to do first is size it. I'm going to, image size is going to go down to 300 once again, and go up and put it at 4.25 inches. Okay, now I'm going to go back over to Print Tool. I'm going to open up the new version of Patti. Now I'm going to put the substrate into the printer. I'm going to run out this negative, and then we will take that negative back into the darkroom, dry it, coat a new piece of paper, and then print that. Okay, so stick with me. All right, necessary adjustments made and the negative made, and I took the liberty to come in and coat the paper and save you that portion of it. So I've coated it and I've exposed it here. So it's time to get it into the developer and see if our adjustments were correct. So here we go. Once again, pouring the potassium oxalate on here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, now see that? Oh yeah, that's really nice. That kind of, at least in the, yeah, it takes care of the issue I had with the contrast, kind of, you know, it has lightened up the sweater a little bit, but yet I still see some detail in there. And her hair has gone a little blacker, which is what I wanted. So this could be it. What I'm going to do though is the same thing as before. Now this print was made exactly like the last one. I went through in the same workflow. I did 5 drops of palladium, 5 drops of ferric oxalate, 2 drops of tween, same paper, same everything, same exposure. So I want to keep everything consistent in that way so that you know that, you know, if you've made a mistake someplace, it's pretty easy to see. So yeah, this could be it. So let me go through the clearing baths and washing it and drying it, and then I'll see you outside in the other room once again, and we'll decide whether this is it or not. So bear with me, all right? All right. So, as I expected, the most recent iteration of the print is the one. This is the beauty print. I'm really happy with it. It's the most close representation to the one on the screen. It has a little bit more of a tactile feeling, obviously, because it's a reflective image and not the radiative image on the screen. So I'm really happy with it. And so this is going to be it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to back out in here. I'm just going to undo everything that I did, other than the go back up to the undo image size. Now I've got my image ready to go now for the next print. So now what I can do is I can size this for the final print that I'm going to do, and I know that all my adjustments are right. Now there is that chance that when I print the print larger, there's going to be something about that perhaps that I don't like, and I'm maybe going to want to go back and tweak it a little bit more. But I doubt that. That isn't normally the case. So I'm really happy with it. I'm really glad that you stuck with me on this. This gives you insight into how I make my negative and how I proof it. So next up in the series is going to be making the big print. I'm going to make a big 10 by 10 print of this. Never done that before with this one, and you know, that will be the subject of the next video. We'll go through and I'll finally mask the paper, and we'll coat it then, and then I'll also mask the big negative, and we will make a really nice finish print from this. So again, thanks for sticking with me. If you like this, really, please give me a thumbs up. I'm finding out that really helps a lot. Things are really starting to take off with the channel. I'm really happy about this and that, and you're a big part of that. I really appreciate it. Please tell a friend, keep spreading the word. We're going to have some more fun, and look for part 3 very soon. All right? Take care of yourselves, and bye-bye.